I just want to, I guess, walk through relatively quickly what I find so special about Filecoin and why it's not just another layer one. Why I call it the most important project since Bitcoin in our space, and I'm very confident in that statement. This for me started at the Ethereum DevCon 2 conference in Shanghai when Juan Benet gave an incredibly charismatic and passionate speech and offered a demo of Filecoin, pulling video from beyond the Great Firewall of China in a hotel that had terrible internet. And watching the Chinese nationals who had just normally every day dealt with terrible internet and not really pulled streaming video in HD, maybe in their whole lives, go through this emotion of seeing this maybe for the first time and being up on their chairs, like screaming and yelling and carrying on and recognizing that this was a moment, this was a seminal moment for these people, that they saw a technology that solved a really fundamental problem for them. I think that moment has been a catalyst that has led to the unbelievable explosion of Filecoin in China and the popularity that the Protocol Labs projects across the board have enjoyed across Asia. And to be able to witness that and understand that this was a real world use case that really mattered for real people. And it wasn't just sort of, crypto nerds playing around with money Legos and things like that, that this was actually something that people could kind of wrap their hands around and understand in a deep way. As we moved through the early days of Polychain, I noticed that Filecoin was the best example that I could use in fundraising conversations or in general conversations to explain next generation networks, where, as Brad very eloquently put it, the difference between investor and consumer would be blurred. And then today, I'm actually very surprised, but incredibly proud that Filecoin, to my understanding, is the first decentralized network that is offering the same service that a centralized network offers at objectively a dramatically lower price. Today, you can store files on IPFS with Filecoin for less than you can store files on Dropbox or Amazon Web Services. That's huge. This is crossing the Rubicon. And this technology is the first to do it. And I'm incredibly excited what the implications of that are going forward. Filecoin, IPFS, libp2p, and the related technologies that have been produced by the incredible team at Protocol Labs are used by almost every other major technically sophisticated layer one in the entire industry. This is a wide sweeping technology that has implications for a range of different use cases, from DeFi to obviously file storage. And maybe in a bit of hubris in 2017, I was caught many times arguing or predicting that Protocol Labs would be bigger than Google by the end of the next decade. As we look at the success and the implications of the cost effectiveness of Filecoin and where this team is going with related technologies, I actually feel pretty confident about that prediction, that by the end of this decade, Protocol Labs will be a larger company and more important globally than Google. And so we're on this incredibly, what we've seen with Filecoin and the early days of this, the go live moment of this network, is this incredible path and rapid growth in competition among miners. On one side, this should be very encouraging because we're reaching a point of near perfect competition where prices are driving down, and that's better for the consumer. There are at times some questions with respect to just how fast this is industrialized, how fast this is professionalized. But if we draw allegories to other networks over the last, say, 10 or 15 years, say Airbnb and Uber, we actually note that the vast majority of Airbnb operators are professional operators with large numbers of units, rather than just say like one or two people, or somebody offering one or two properties in their portfolio. Something else that I find really special about Filecoin that we don't talk enough about in the space generally is the energy efficiency of this ecosystem. We're seeing one of the most energy efficient networks that, again, offers a real world use case that matters to people. I think that's really important going forward, especially as we look at, issues around climate change. We need to think very deeply about the energy intensity that our industry consumes. And then I would also note to people that it's going to take a few years to build out all of the layers of apps and tools and wallets and connective tissue and so on necessary to make this really work. And if we look to Ethereum and if we look to Bitcoin, we note that it really took a few years before we started to see use cases that people kind of wrap their arms around. And so I would encourage the community to be patient, but not too patient, to go out and build those things and build those important infrastructure components, because there will be great value unlocked by doing that. And so some businesses that I would love to see and I would love to fund tackle just very pragmatic problems within the Filecoin ecosystem today. Primarily, we see a very significant demand-supply imbalance. We've had wonderful growth on the supply side of storage, led by a lot of the miners from China, inspired by that amazing speech back in 2016 by Juan Benet. And today we've got over an exabyte of storage on the network. On the flip side, we only have a little bit more than a petabyte of storage on being used on the network. And so I want to see mechanisms that drive incentivization to use Filecoin. We're in a world today of negative interest rates. And so I am very open-minded right now to having, say, negative interest rates for storing files. Maybe we should be paying people to store files to help bootstrap the network and help get a certain level of demand going, so that we've got more balance between supply and demand. I'd like to see maybe a decentralized group come together and make a donation and in order to help bootstrap demand and pay people to actually store their files on Filecoin. And whether that's a DAO or something else, who knows? Let's see where that goes. Another thing that I think is really interesting is pinning services. So pinning services we can look at like, kind of white glove services that offer retrieval really quickly, or ensure redundancy at a certain level. And these services really need to look and feel like Google Drive or like Dropbox. And you really should also be able to connect into them, say, with a credit card. So you don't have to have Filecoin natively to use IPFS and store files on the network. And so making that as seamless as possible for the non-crypto native, I think is really important. Friends of ours at ChainSafe in Toronto are building up something similar, but we're going to need a lot of experiments in the pinning service area in order to be successful. I would call particular attention to pinning services in China, where Filecoin is particularly popular. And very frankly, crypto is unfolding in China more than anywhere else on the planet. And I'm really excited about what's happening there. And within that, we need to recognize that pinning services may bear a different risk profile in China than they do in other parts of the world. And so having some different experiments that offer additional layers of privacy for the pinning service operators, I think will be really fundamental to having fast retrieval and just a good overall user experience in China, where that's such a fundamental market. Other really similar, easy things that I would love to see is, say, like a browser plugin. Someone like what Evernote has had over the years, where you can just sort of click and save things to a specific content hash, or maybe a specific set of hashes based on topical interests. That would be really cool. And then the last thing that I think we'll see very, very quickly is a range of DeFi applications associated with Filecoin. So we could have futures or derivatives on storage prices, similar to futures and derivatives on gas prices. And generally, I think we'll see a lot of cross-pollination and synergies between the Ethereum network and the Filecoin network. And so all of these are a range of things that I would love to see. I'd love to fund. I'd love to collaborate with. And so to the extent that this is of interest to you, or you're building any of these ideas, reach out, and I'd love to connect and jam on ideas.